Welcome to listening to Paint Dry with Mike and Dan, a podcast about the art and hobby of miniature painting. I'm Mike, and thank you so much for joining us on our continued quest to become better, braver, happier painters. So this episode is super late, not just in the context that it's been about a month since we've had an episode out, but it's also late because I actually recorded this interview with Lyla prior to going to ReaperCon. So my heartfelt apologies to Lyla and to our listeners. Hopefully we're back on track now. No real excuses, just, life kind of got in the way. So I apologize. But the good news is that we have a lot of great content that is all getting ready to finally come out. And it starts today with a fantastic interview with the wonderfully talented Lyla Mev, the Mini Witch. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
It's always a thrill for me to get to meet people from the YouTube world of miniature painting that really do fantastic videos like yourself. And first off, to start, I want to say thank you for your contribution to the community. I feel like you've really become a star of the community, and a lot of people are learning from you, and that's awesome.
Well, thank you very kindly. That means so much to me.
It's this is an interesting community in that there are a lot of people that make money off of it, but everybody answers questions and always, so it's been kind of neat watching the way it's evolved. So to start out, let's ask this question of you. How did you get started in miniature painting?
Well, actually, I got started into miniature painting in a very way that's different than how most people got into miniature painting. I started out wanting to sculpt and paint ball-jointed dolls for my graduate school thesis, and I was absolutely terrible at it. But at that same time, my husband had convinced me to try Dungeons and Dragons, and I was very reluctant to do so because I thought that it was lame, and fought him for several months before I finally accepted that I would appease him and try at least one session of Dungeons and Dragons. And then I completely fell in love with it and play it every weekend. And when I don't get to play it, I'm rather heartbroken about it. But anyway, since I had all of these tiny paintbrushes and all of the supplies that I needed to do ball jointed dolls, I figured that I might as well use all of those supplies and try painting miniatures instead. And I completely fell in love with that. And I definitely never expected it to take up as much time of my life as it does. But I'm absolutely thrilled that this is where my life has taken me. It's been a surprise, but I'm very happy about where I've ended up.
So that's interesting. You were making ball jointed dolls for your thesis?
Yes, for grad school.
What were you in, if you don't mind me asking, what were you in graduate school for?
Oh, absolutely. It's a very important part of how I got to where I am. So I went to graduate school for photography. I got my Master's of Fine Art in Photography. The Master's is the permanent degree for this field, so that means that I can be a college professor.
Oh, nice. Now, did you teach photography for a while?
I taught for a very limited amount of time. I've been an adjunct for just a handful of classes, unfortunately. The dream was to go to grad school, get my master's, and then go off into the world and teach photography. And you know what? There's not a lot of positions for that. Not a lot of people are hiring for that, oddly enough. And so I was not able to get the adjunct places that I wanted unless I was willing to move, and I was not willing to move. So I looked into where I could teach elsewhere, and I gave a few individual lessons for photography, and then decided that I was pretty damn good at this mini painting stuff. And there weren't that many mini painters teaching on YouTube, so I could probably do that. And so that's how I ended up on YouTube. Was basically I couldn't teach photography, but I had this very strong drive to teach people, and just decided that I would try my hand at teaching miniature painting instead.
Now, what made you decide when you were looking at the brushes and stuff and you said, hey, you know what, I could also paint miniatures? What kind of made you decide to say, you know what, I want to keep pushing it and go to the next level and make my minis like the best,
Well, I think that since I started with miniature painting at such a different place than most people, I didn't really have a next level. I just started painting. Like the first thing that I painted had object source lighting in it, and I didn't even know what object source lighting was. It was just that this character was holding a flaming skull and there would be reflections in his armor. Like it was that simple. I didn't come in with this predetermined idea of object source lighting is difficult or non-metallic metal is difficult. It was just, well, this is what it would realistically be, so this is how I'm going to paint it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm wondering, I know we're steering a little bit away from the questions, but this is fascinating.
I apologize.
No, don't apologize for that. This is great. So besides obviously the context of being able to take great photos of your minis, has understanding of light and shadow from photography helped your miniature painting?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Beyond just photography helping my miniature painting, actually retouching has really helped my miniature painting. I ran a freelance studio for over a decade doing weddings and senior portraits, and all of the glamour editing that I had to do and understanding how to make people look the best, how to work with my dramatic lighting and achieve the lighting that I wanted in the studio has all really helped me understand how to paint miniatures. For example, painting the face, it's basically contouring. I mean, I'm a girl, so I know contouring even more, but it's the same steps that you would take in retouching to make someone look good that you do when you're painting miniatures.
Well, that's really cool. I'm actually sitting with, I can now I'm blanking on I think it's James Gurney, Light and Shadow book. It's a photography / fantasy art book. It's that actually, I'm like, you make me like, oh my goodness, I got to pick that up again. I haven't read that in a couple of weeks.
Yes, as a photographer, lighting was always one of my specialties. I was doing very dramatic things with 5 different lights and things like that. So lighting came very natural to me, and it definitely helped me with my miniature painting.
One of the things I found interesting in reading some photography books, and maybe you could kind of confirm this for me, is that when they talk about the shadows on things like the face, that actually the shadows on the face are more reflective of the color environment around it as opposed to the light on the face. Am I reading that correctly when I read the photography books? So like in somebody's shadows, you'll see more of, like, if they're wearing a purple hood, you'll see it more in the shadow than you would in the light reflection.
It doesn't particularly matter if it's shadow or not, but if it is reflecting. So if you have a light falling directly on you, the light isn't reflecting onto you. Well, most likely the light is being put straight upon you. But other areas where the light is reflecting, whether or not that be in the shadows, or if you have a reflector dish or other things like that to bounce light onto the subject, whatever color is around it will transfer onto the subject. So for example, this is why reflectors are usually silver or white, because if you did a green reflector, you would reflect a green light onto the subject.
That makes sense. That makes sense for sure. So as you're painting along and learning more about painting miniatures, has there been a technique or a concept that you've kind of struggled with? And if so, how did you get past that?
The technique that took me the longest to learn was wet blending, but now it is an absolute staple in my mini painting arsenal. I do the majority of my painting in wet blending and have to actively remember not to do wet blending because that's not what the majority of my audience does. And if I want to be able to teach in a way that's digestible to my students and viewers, I can't do the easiest, more advanced technique to me. But so once I figured out how to do wet blending, this whole like new door opened up to me, specifically with how fast I could paint.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's something that I still struggle with. I know a lot of people talk about non-metallic metals and even OSL, which I think there are very, very few painters. Like there are amazing, tons of amazing NMM painters, but there are very few good OSL painters. And so wet blending has kind of been my devil's bane myself, so I could feel your pain there. Can you throw out a tip for us if we're trying to learn wet blending?
Oh, totally. I was actually giving a private lesson and my student wanted to learn about wet blending and I was telling him how to do it and it just wasn't working. And I was watching him thinking, I don't understand why this isn't working for you. And so I did wet blending on my own. And I really thought about what angle is the brush at? How hard am I pushing? And really trying to dissect how I was doing it so that I could better teach my students. And I realized that the secret to wet blending is using more of the belly of your brush to blend and not using the tip of your brush to blend. If you use the tip, you're more likely to get those painterly strokes, whereas if you use the belly of the brush, it's actually going to blend out a lot smoother.
All right, I'm going to make sure that I write that down while I'm editing this. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
It inspired the miniature painting secrets revealed video that I did, which was like my breakout video. But I just sat down and thought about all of the techniques and really breaking them down and thinking, am I explaining this in the easiest way possible for someone who doesn't know anything to be able to come and pick up all of these techniques?
You know, for people like me with no art background, we certainly appreciate it. And I'm sure people with art backgrounds do as well, but thank you for doing stuff like that. So kind of along that same lines, I take it that because now you've had to dissect the way you paint, has making these videos and doing private lessons and teaching, has that actually improved your painting?
I don't know if YouTube or teaching has directly improved my painting. I know that it has improved my teaching, but I have an innate drive to be really good and like the best at anything that I do. So if I wasn't good at miniature painting, I wouldn't do it. So I'm always striving to be the best. Like I've unfortunately never entered a competition. It just hasn't lined up between the pandemic and everything else because I haven't really been painting for that long. But so like if I'm entering a competition, I'm entering to win. I don't know if I will, but I am always trying to be the best and looking at other painters and dissecting their work and trying to figure out how I can improve my own work. So it's more of a internal competition, well, and maybe an external competition too, but an internal competition to try to improve my work.
It's a competition, so it's not like I always have this. Dan and I battle about this all the time, and you know, why enter to lose, right? You know, like don't enter to lose, you enter to win, and if you don't, you understand and learn from it, but you don't enter to lose, you know. Right? So I totally respect your honesty about that. For sure.
It really depends on person to person because I did a video a while ago about how you need to understand the reason why you paint. And if you paint for tabletop standard, if you paint because you want to play Warhammer, then it really doesn't matter how amazing your paint is. And are you putting unrealistic and unneeded expectations on yourself when you're painting? However, if you're like me and have a healthy attitude towards it, then go ahead and paint to win. That's one of the reasons I actually picked up miniature painting and put down photography. I had a very negative viewpoint for photography. If a photo shoot didn't go well, I was completely distraught and asked myself, why does anyone bother to hire me? Why do I bother to do this? I've gone to school for 8 years and this is where I'm at. Whereas with miniature painting, if I mess up, I just sort of put it down and sit back and think, well, time to strip and start again, I guess. And I don't know why that mentality is so different between the two, but having that mentality that if I mess up, it's okay. The next one is going to be even better. And that's what allows me to have this healthy appreciation or this healthy drive for competing.
Maybe let's talk a little bit more about the channel. I know being now, the podcast is about 1.5 years old now. And I go back and listen to the first couple of episodes and I want to put my head through the wall because of how they sound now, where I am now. Are there videos that you have that you're like, you know, I need to re-record those, or, you know, like stuff? Because I know in my process, so it's definitely not just throwing you out there, that I know there's so many episodes I want to go back and like, oh, that was terrible. And if Shoshi Bauer ever listens to these, I have to, I try to apologize for that first interview just because of how bad I was.
When I first started YouTube, I was terrible. Well, I wasn't terrible, but my audio was terrible. And you would think as a photographer, my color would be accurate, and it wasn't. And I was recording with the internal microphone to my digital camera and recording, painting the models with my phone. And a quick shout out to Agent Escher and Atomic for supporting me on Patreon for God only knows what fucking reason, because I was awful. But, you know, my two first patrons who have been with me this whole time, and I've asked them, I'm like, why? What did you see in me? I was so bad. Why did you support me even way back then? And actually, Atomic hasn't answered, but Agent Escher explained that it was because of the art that I bring. It was the different viewpoint that I brought to miniature painting, since I'm approaching it as an artist and not approaching it as a gamer. But anyway, so there are plenty of videos. There are videos that are like 6 months old that I look back at and think, oh, for the love of God, why did people sponsor me? Like, my content is good, but my execution is wanting. So there are plenty of videos. One of my most popular, most watched videos, the audio is terrible because I hadn't learned Adobe Audition yet. And so it was just straight from the mic to YouTube. And everyone who has stuck with me and listens to those videos, you're the real champs for being there this whole time and waiting till I figured it out.
Yeah, and we get a lot of people loved our Jack the Ripper episode, and I hate it. I've listened to it. I've tried to see what people hear in it. I'm like, oh my God, I hate this thing so much, you know. But it's one of our most popular episodes. You know, maybe it's the whole artists are the hardest critic on themselves, right? You know, maybe that's what part of the problem is. Is there a technique that you found that was difficult to translate to video, like something that you wanted to teach that it was a challenge to kind of create the video for it?
As I talked about earlier, the bigger problem is not so much is there a technique that doesn't translate, but just the way that I paint is rather difficult to translate. Because as I said, the wet blending is my main approach. I honestly just paint. Like, I don't really think about how I'm going to do layering here and stippling here. Like, I just wing it and just paint. And then I look back at the footage after I'm done painting it and think, oh my God, how am I going to make a video out of this? Like, I've just done so many different random techniques that I have no idea how I'm going to teach anyone. So that's why I have to be so conscious about, okay, we're going to do layering here because people find layering a lot easier. And I love doing it. I love teaching, but I just find it so amusing because I like forget the basics. Like, I forget how to do layering because I don't do it often enough. And so it's not so much what technique is difficult, but more that I'm difficult.
Oh, I got you. Fair enough. Yeah, that's what way to do it. So a few years down the road, where do you see yourself and where do you see your channel?
Well, the dream would be to be full-time YouTuber, full-time mini painter, whether that's working for studios or private lessons or whatever. That's always been the dream. You know, it used to be a full-time photographer. Now it's be a full-time miniature painter. And so, yes, the dream, full-time miniature painter, stay-at-home cat mom, and YouTuber is the dream. But I am just happy to teach people. I'm growing at a pretty reasonable speed. Will I ever get to be full-time? God, I hope so. Just because I want to do this all the time. But I am growing, and more importantly is when people reach out to me and tell me how much they appreciate what I am doing or that they really liked a video that I'm working on. I had someone reach out to me on Instagram this morning saying, hey, I usually don't message people at random, but I just had to let you know how much I love your stuff and you really inspire me. And I just wanted to let you know that I really appreciate everything you're doing. And I was having a hard day today, and hearing that from just randomly out of the blue is what reminds me to keep doing this, because although I love miniature painting, I actually don't really like YouTubing. Like there's like a hobby within YouTubing to do the analytics and the algorithm, and like that is a necessary beast for what I do. But it's nice to be reminded that all of the effort that I put into making YouTube work is worth it. So in the future, I would love to be producing my own models, even if it's just one or two. That's something that I really want to do, because there's representation that I want in the miniature world that it is not there currently. That's another one of the reasons I started doing YouTube, was not only because as an artist, I was going to come at this with a very different perspective, but also as a woman, I was going to come at it as a very different perspective. I had not heard of Dana Howell when I started this. I hadn't heard of a lot of miniature painters on YouTube. I thought there were like 3, and therefore I could make it 2 because, you know, there was only Miniac and Squidmar. There wasn't that much competition for me. So I wanted to come in and be a woman in this hobby. And I would love to produce models for women in this hobby. And I'm not saying like beefcake models, but just realistic women would be nice. Like shot put size track athletes, or like Olympic bodybuilders, or, you know, something beyond just the big butt, small waist, and big boobs would be wonderful. So I would love to do that. I don't even know where to start when it comes to that, but that is the dream. So full-time YouTuber, stay-at-home cat mom, producing miniatures.
Fantastic. That's awesome. Now, and you know, and that's one of the things I always find interesting too, is the world of 3D printing. I'm seeing like, I guess I'm trying to, because I'm right there with you, absolutely, totally about representation, you know, because I'm not a beefcake barbarian by myself, you know, like like that the Conan doesn't look like me, and so like there's not a lot of dad bod models out there, and so I think plus I'm also the mindset that more minis better, right? The more minis are out there, the better everything is. But do you think that world is somewhat changing now in the world of 3D printing? Because I've even noticed like I can't think of the guy who sculpted it, but there was this there's a Viking bather painting who is a larger woman, and I had never, like, I was like, wow, there finally, you know, there's an example of, like, you know, different shape sized woman, that's not just the Kingdom Death pinup, you know.
Is that the one where she's standing in water and holding the helmet?
Yes.
Actually, the person who commissioned that sculpt wants to send me one.
Yeah. Okay. That would be awesome to see what you do with that.
Yeah, I was definitely very excited for that. I love that piece.
Yeah.
Just because it's different. It's real. It's a lot more like art. And although I love painting 28mm, 32, 75 and busts just have a special place in my heart because they're more like art and execution of skill and putting in the thought process of what color contrast I'm going to use, and I'm going to use red, or color contrast that I'm going to use, and like I'm going to add blush on her because it's cold where she is, so her nose is slightly turned red, and her ears are also red because of the cold wind, but her lips are blue because, again, the chill. And like you can put so much more thought and effort into the larger models than you can in the smaller models. So I love approaching miniatures like art. So yeah, I'm all for those bigger models.
Yeah, no, and that's I'm right there with you. I feel like over time, not only as I'm getting older, my eyes are getting worse, but there's so much more of a canvas with a 75mm figure or a 54mm figure, and so it's so much more interesting. I don't know. I myself am moving away from gaming miniatures to painting more of those style miniatures as well, so I can appreciate what you're saying. So usually I'll ask this question towards the end of an interview, but I'm going to throw it in here because it makes more of sense then.
Okay, but
So,
I actually didn't answer your previous question. I was going to segue back around.
You were going to segue back around. Okay,
I'm segueing back around. Wait a minute.
My bad. I got us derailed there for a second. Sorry.
Excuse me, sir. There's a question I haven't answered.
Please go right ahead.
To segue back to your original question, 3D printing has had a big impact on the miniature painting world. Some of it has been good and some of it not so good. There is a huge opportunity for there to be more representation in miniatures. Basically, anyone can sculpt. I could commission someone to sculpt. I can see exactly the miniature that I want, which is really fantastic. And there are companies that I know are now in business because of 3D printing, because of the popularity of 3D printing, where they can sell STLs that might not sell as well just because of the subject matter. So I think that overall 3D printing is a fantastic thing to happen to the hobby. And I know that when I start printing models, I have no doubt that 3D printing will absolutely be a key part of it. I will probably sell STL files to whatever I end up designing, however many years down the line. So I think that 3D printing has and will hopefully even more so continue to have a big impact on the representation in miniature painting.
Awesome. And I'm an Etsy addict. I don't have a printer myself, but I sit there on Etsy, like I type in resin miniatures and then there's the rabbit hole for me. And I've noticed that we're getting more and more I don't know. I always I feel like if you love art, then the basis of art to me is kind of diversity, and seeing different, like, not only the different shapes, sizes of everything in the world, from people to animals to structures to everything, but the different way that people see colors is amazing too. It's just always interesting to me. My wife and I see color very, very different. Right? Like, we can't agree on, like, when we're trying to paint the house, we're like, oh, that's blue. No, it's gray. No, it's blue. It's gray. And so just like kind of the concept of those things is just, I just always feel that art is the one thing that should be easy to represent everybody more. You know what I'm saying? I don't know if that makes sense. I don't know.
No, it does.
No, I'm just
rambling. When I released my We Need Better Miniatures video, I got a lot of hate, which is what I expected. It was a video about how I wanted to see more realistic and better clad women miniatures, and I got a lot of hate for it.
That sucks.
That's a thing. I did not get nearly as much hate as I was expecting. I was like preparing to bunker down, like ready for like hell to rain down, and it didn't, and that went extremely well overall. But anyway, the amount of people who were so offended and upset that I so politely asked for more options. I didn't say don't paint sexy models. The Flower Witch from Kingdom Death is the model that got me into painting. And if you don't know the model, she has huge boobs, wasp waist. You can't even see her face because it's covered by a mask. Like, she's just this babylicious, gorgeous fairy. And I saw that model and said, holy shit, I want to do that. But so I could not understand the amount of people who were absolutely livid that I dared to request more models.
Ignore haters, man. That's always the number one thing, is ignore them, because honestly, if you're not doing something right, then nobody pays attention to you. So if people are hating on you, that's probably means you're doing something right. You know what I mean?
Yeah, when people would say that if you're so upset about it, go start your own Kickstarter and go start your own miniature painting line if you're that offended. And I would reply with, wow, thank you so much for showing your support. As soon as I launch my Kickstarter, I'll be sure to send it to you. And I look forward to receiving your monetary donation, since you are so excited for me to start my own model line. Right. Thank you so much. I'm just like the queen of patronizing, of being like too nice to a fault. And like, so that My husband had to hold me back
Right.
a lot. I think I only replied to like 3 people, but every time I replied was just like, I'm too fucking nice to you.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I want to jump in and I coach. I have a part-time job coaching debate, so I'm like, I want to jump right in and start arguing with these people. But yeah, for sure, I think it just means you're doing something right when people are trolling you. You know, how dare you ask for a better selection of minis? And I'm always interested too to look to see what these people have demanded from Games Workshop. Right, like they've said, oh, you know, we want this model to come out, or we want the rules to be this way, and it'll be like, how dare you tell them what you want? Start your own game, you know, like go create and build your own game, you know. But
Yeah.
what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So along that same line then, and it doesn't have to be like the question I typically ask towards the end, but I'm going to ask it now because it kind of fits perfectly with this. Is there maybe a model or a character from a book or any form of genre or medium that you would be interested in seeing appear in miniature form and painting it? I always use the Stephen King Dark Tower series characters as my example. I know I'm jumping ahead on the questions. I apologize, but it just seemed to fit so perfectly.
Yeah. Well, I'm pleased to say that with the advent of 3D printing, there are more well-clad women models. So I am thrilled. Actually, the most recent Age of Sigmar, well, maybe not most recent, the most recent Age of Sigmar release, to me, I was pleased to see that the women armor was better. They didn't have like separate boob cups, like it was like a slight curvature just to like hint that they were women. And I said, you know what, I accept that. That is progress. I am happy. You know, we can still do better, but there has been progress and I am pleased. But so beyond just more badass women models, which is what I would focus on, I would want to see androgynous models and then plus size models. Again, I talked about this a bit earlier with wanting to see like Olympic shot putters or Olympic weightlifters, or just like even the models that are better are still conventionally attractive. And now that that's bad, I mean, that makes sense. I also want to paint a pretty face, but I feel like there's the stereotype that plays into miniature painting, which is bad guys are ugly and then the good guys are attractive. And so if we could have some like average people, that would be cool. But more so, I would just like to see, like, they're supposed to be heroic. They're supposed to be badass and awesome and gorgeous. And I totally get that. But could we add on like an extra 20 or 30 pounds, or like, do their boobs need to be out? Do they all need to be like G cups? Or can we have like an A cup? Or maybe you can't tell. Is it a man or is it a woman? I'm not sure. They're a fae. Who the fuck knows? The fae do whatever the fuck the fae want.
Right.
Like, so that's the sort of things that I would be looking for. Is I would want to sort of play with stereotypes and break stereotypes and just, yeah, put things on their head how they're not supposed to be. And like really sexy vampire who's like 50 pounds overweight. That's what I want to see. So
yeah, I'd paint that figure. I'd paint that figure for sure. Have you ever heard of the comic book The Max?
I have not.
Okay. Yeah, there actually is an artist who, this is an older series, but they wanted to kind of defy the stereotype of the female in the comic book world and also the male superhero version. And so basically the story is a homeless guy thinks he's a superhero, may actually be one, but you never get quite the answer that whether or not he actually is a superhero. And he's supposed to be rescuing his social worker, who is heavier, probably 20-30 pounds overweight, not your stereotypical main female character in a comic book. and she of course winds up saving him most of the time because that's the way the story winds up working. But yeah, it might be something I'll have to say. I'll send you a link to some of the stuff that they have, because it actually is, that's the other one that I actually have played a little bit with sculpting, and so I'm trying to like figure out if there's a way I could do a little diorama with him and her kind of in the thing. So but I'm to say I played around with sculpting, I've drawn some circles and boxes and stuff like that, but you know, just getting started. But that might be a storyline or a comic book that you might be interested in, because that one always, I haven't read it in 15, 20 years, and it's stuck in my head as kind of being different. So
I appreciate the advice. I will have to look into it.
let me ask you this then, the complete change of course, because I do always want to ask this. Where do you get your inspiration for a project?
Where do I get my inspiration for a project? It depends on the project. If I'm painting something for YouTube and I have a specific skill that I want to paint, I usually think about what is the best way that I can demonstrate whatever skill I am working on. If I'm being sponsored for a video and this is the model I have to paint, then I look on Pinterest or Instagram or wherever and try to look at other artists' work. Peter Moorbacher is my absolute favorite. His use of color is just amazing, and so I look at other people's artwork. I look at I don't want to start that argument. I look at I'm not going to start that. I look at other mediums of painting and how they portray subjects and then take the colors from that. But otherwise, I get inspired a lot by art history and mythology. There is a painting by Caravaggio from the Baroque period. The Baroque period is my absolute favorite. Chiaroscuro lighting, to die for. Highly recommend. But it's Judith and Holofernes. But basically, it is a woman cutting the man's head off in a painting, and I'm like, that's inspiring, because that's something that you don't see painted in whatever century this is occurring in. But so right. I find a lot of my inspiration from art history and art movements. The video that I'm releasing this week is inspired by Impressionism, and I am teaching people how to use Impressionism in their miniature painting, basically to say that you don't need to paint all of the tiny details. You only need to paint enough for your viewer to be able to connect the dots and figure out what you're trying to paint. Yep. So I guess I get inspiration from everywhere. I sort of like went around your question and danced around it, but didn't actually answer it, because the answer is that I get inspiration all over the place. All over the place. Okay, so then talk to me about a Lyla project, how that kind of works differently than a YouTube project. Absolutely. So the bane of my existence with YouTube, other than audio, is time, which is why I would love to go full time. I would love to be able to dedicate more time to YouTube. 4 videos a month instead of 3 would be fantastic. It will also help the algorithm, but that's just a bonus. But I would love to have more time to dedicate to YouTube and Lyla Mev and teaching. But I need to paint within a certain time frame. And for YouTube, it's usually like 3 weeks, which maybe to some people sounds like a lot, but to me is not always enough, especially since I like to do bigger projects. But so I usually start out with a digital mock-up where I paint my scene digitally using Procreate on the iPad, so I can see all of the colors that I want. And I'm thinking about things like what color is the light? What is the mood or atmosphere that I want in this piece? What does that mood or atmosphere say? If I'm thinking that I want to have like a purple light from one side, then I should use a greenish light from the other, because that will be complementary colors. And so I have a lot deeper thought process that goes into my projects, as well as I am an absolute perfectionist, and I will do all of the little tiny details. Like I painted a miniature recently, and she has these ovals on her armor. And I was just going to leave them. And I'm like, nah, they could be gems. They could be rivets. I don't want to deal with it. And I showed it to someone else and they said, aren't you going to paint those little ovals? Those are gems. And I'm like, I don't have time. And they said, the Lyla we know would make time, because the Lyla we know goes above and beyond in every single project and makes every project the best she can make it. And they were right. So when I'm working on myself, I am thinking about, like I said, all the different color contrasts, all the different strings that I can pull from. I've done a lot of artwork based on religion, which, we're not going to get into, but a lot of my photography work had a lot of religious symbolism in it. And although I can't quite get that with miniature painting, because most miniature painting, aren't sculpted with that in mind. Right. But those are still colors and symbolisms and things like that I'm thinking about pulling into my miniature painting. So when it's my own piece, I dig down to the depths of art history and all of the things that I could be referencing, from how I apply the paint to what colors I'm using, to how much, do I want to put freehand in? Is there weathering involved? What's the story to this? And it's just a lot bigger of a process, because I do like a little world within this miniature. And so it takes a lot more time. It takes a lot more mental effort. And I'm considering basically everything. If you look at a model I've done, like a big project I've done, I have considered probably everything. Like, why did you paint this bust with a gold chain instead of a silver chain for the necklace? Oh, well, I could use the magenta that I had in the cloak and pull it into the shadows of the gold, and therefore the gold necklace would be more harmonious than a silver necklace. Like, I think about all of that.
Jeez, wow. That is a huge process for sure. If I thought that way, I wouldn't get anything done. I wouldn't even get anything started. So I'm impressed that you can actually get a project started and finished. I can't even get it started if I go that route. Sometimes I have to just be like, damn it, put a brush on it, So kind of along the conversation with colors and such, one of the big topics that seems to be all a buzz through YouTube, at least I've seen 4 or 5 different people that have done videos on it, are universal shade and highlight colors. And I kind of use this question to ask, are there colors that make their way to your palette all the time? Like, I know deck tan and eyeshadow just appear on my palette without me even getting them, and I wind up using them almost every project, and so are there colors like that for you?
Yes, Reaper's Brick Red and Golden Blonde I use basically on everything. My favorite color combination is like magenta and lime green, sort of like in their complementary colors. And I didn't really realize that hot pink, or like the magenta spectrum, was my color until someone else pointed it out to me. And then I looked through all of my Instagram photos and went, wow, they're all pink. And so
that's fantastic. That's great it's one of those things. Michael Proctor from Reaper is purple. Like, everything he's got is, like all of his box art has a lot of purple in it. And he's like, damn it, I have a lot of purple.
There are some colors or styles or things that people are just drawn to naturally. With miniature painting, I've embraced it, but with photography, I would fight against myself because I had this style that was innate to me and I hated it. I wanted it to be different and I just could never escape myself. And with miniature painting, I have embraced what is my style, which is basically trying to paint things as realistically and detailed as I possibly can. But so not everyone develops their own style, or maybe they haven't noticed it yet, or maybe they're so new or don't care or whatever. But if you have your own style and you're developing your own style, just go with it. It's not worth it to fight yourself. Like I said, I've been a photographer for, God, how old am I? Almost 17 years at this point. And I have the same style that I had at year 2 that I have now. And even though I've hated it quite a bit throughout that time, I just can't escape myself. So the sooner that you just embrace whatever your miniature painting style is and actively choose to get better at it. I had to learn how to paint pink because I was using it all the time, so I better know how to paint it. So figure out what your style is, accept it, and then try to improve what your style is.
Nice. That's excellent advice for sure. And with that, I think this would be a good time to do the lightning round. Just basically the lightning round is just a few quick questions asking you kind of your gut reactions to things. Of course, take as much time as you want, but the quicker the answer, the more gut reaction it is. So
cats. The answer is cats.
Cats. Okay. What's your favorite color? Cat.
Cats.
All right, so let's start with the one I already threw. One I gave you as an example, which is, when was the last time you drank your paint water?
It's been quite a while. I have the paint puck now, which has a ring around the cup to hold your brushes, and so it would be very difficult to drink from now. I would definitely recognize that this is clearly not my paint cup. But when was the last time I dipped my paintbrush into my coffee mug to clean it? That has happened far more frequently. I think that was like last week.
Nice. I did. Yeah, I switched over to mason jars, like these really odd shaped mason jars, in order to stop myself from picking up my paint water. Yeah, for sure. So the second question, the gods of the paintbrushes have come down and said, you may only paint with one paintbrush. At what size and what brand would it be?
Oh, are you sure I can't do two? Are you positive I can't do two?
It's just, you got one, just one.
Man, it's the Winsor Newton Series 7 round watercolor brush, size 1.
Size 1. It's a workhorse. That is a good workhorse. You're not. I interviewed an artist yesterday, Chris Surhi, and that was the same brush. Said exactly the same brush. I think this actually, since we started a lightning round, I think 4 out of 5 painters have preferred Winsor Newton. So the next lightning round question: model paints, heavy body acrylics, or inks?
Sorry, I just said it's the lightning round and I sat there in silence. Hobby paints.
Hobby paints.
Well, actually, my first thought was Chimera, and then
that's fine. That's a perfectly acceptable answer. So, and you've been using the Chimera for a while now?
Only a couple weeks actually.
Oh wow!
But, oh my god, Chimera. So that was my very first thought, and then that doesn't actually answer the question. So that was the silence. Wait, where does Chimera fall on the spectrum? But so the lightning round answer is Chimera. But yes, hobby paints overall.
Oh, hobby paints overall. Excellent. All right, so the final one, TMM or NMM, and why?
NMM all the way. I am a control freak. If I am not about to paint metallic paint and have the light shine those highlights and shadows wherever the fuck it wants, I'm in control of that shit. I am not letting
nice.
someone else's atmosphere mess with my art. So NMM all the way. And I know that there are people who say non-metallic metal only looks good from one angle. Where are you lit by? What are you lit by that the non-metallic metal doesn't look good from every angle? Because my non-metallic metal looks good from every angle. So I don't know what your lighting situation is that it's not looking good for you at every angle, but it does for me.
Right. And here, the killer for me with this argument is TMM and NMM are the same thing, except for the base coat, right? It's basically the base coat of metallic paint versus base coat of non-metallic paint. And then you're using non-metallic paints on a metallic paint to control lights and reflections. So there's really very little difference in them, and they have the same problem that once you start adding non-metallic paints to a metallic paint, like your black inks or blue inks and adding stuff like that, now you're taking away the value argument of the metallic paint. So it's kind of, you're trying to control the lights and shadows that way too. So it would functionally have the same problem as non-metallic metal when you turn it.
See, I think those are fighting words.
Oh. That's okay.
I do not agree at all.
Don't. Okay.
No, because true metallic metal paint doesn't have those alternating light and darks that you need to make it look metallic.
Mhm.
Really, metallic paint, at least in my opinion, maybe there are metallic paints that I am missing out on and that I could be wrong. Feel free to let me know. But the metallic paints that I have seen are more like shiny glitter paints.
Mhm.
Like the whole point of non-metallic metal is the alternation of light and dark and having the highlights that reflect from the ground underneath. And you
Right.
don't get that with metallic paint.
Right. I think you misunderstood me. I'm on this. You and I are on the same page.
Oh, we are.
Yeah, we absolutely. My argument just said every flaw that people that are into TMM say about non-metallic metal, the true metallic metal has some of the same problems.
We are on the same page.
Yes,
I
absolutely.
rescind my fighting words.
No, oh no, they are fighting words on the internet. If you throw them out there in Google or something along those lines, you get some strong opinions about non-metallic versus true metallic metals. But no, I appreciate your answer, because I am definitely in the non-metallic camp, because I also hate working with metallic paints. They always look clumpy to me, and even when they're as smooth as butter, like the Vallejo metal color paints, which are really super smooth, I still, maybe it's psychological, I can see the flex as opposed to being like a flat sheet of metal. You know what I mean?
Yeah, when I painted my first model that used metallic paint, it was the one that I painted with object source lighting. And I painted one model with metallic paint and said, what the crap is this? This isn't what I want. Mm-hmm. And so one model in, and I went, okay, how do other people do this? Because this can't be the only way.
Right.
So like my second model was, okay, time to learn non-metallic metal, because I'm not putting up with this.
Right. I agree. I agree. Well, the motto of the podcast is better, braver, happier painters. I was wondering if you could give our listeners some final advice as they go on or continue on their painting journeys.
If you really want to improve, you need to learn about art. You can watch plenty of YouTubers or read blogs about mini painting, but if you want to paint to display quality, you want to paint really well done miniatures, oil paint artists have been doing this for hundreds of years. You do not need to reinvent the wheel, because the wheel is already out there and it's called art history. So if you want to get better, go look what's already been done, whether that's choosing an art movement. Like I said, Baroque is my favorite. I saw Baroque and absolutely fell in love. I had never considered, like I had learned about art history in school, and it was always just this unfortunate subject that I had to put up with. And then I saw Baroque and went, oh my God, that's an option. I never thought about that. Just not to go down art, but like Renaissance era was like the calm before the storm, whereas the Baroque is literally the waves are down upon us and I am fighting for my life. Like, right. And it had never occurred to me that there could be that much difference in art. And so go look through an art era timeline and see what paintings call out to you, whether that be through color scheme or their use of light or the literal techniques that you're using. Maybe you want to do pointillism. I don't recommend it, but maybe you do. But it's already been done. So go out there and look. The answer is not going to be on some mini painter YouTuber's channel. The answer is out there in the art world.
Nice. Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. Can you tell our listeners where to find you?
Yes, you can find me on Instagram at lyla.mev. You can find me on YouTube. I'm Lyla Mev the Mini Witch. You can support me on Patreon, which is, my personal favorite, and join my growing community. I offer private lessons. I offer a paint hangout / live stream every other Sunday. We talk about life and painting, and my Patreon is more about building a community. Like you do get access to early content, but really it's about creating a community where people are welcome and about painting. It's not about this is a paywall to get access to my mini painting. You already get that on YouTube. But if you want access to me and my advice and the wonderful community that I've developed, that's on Patreon.
Fantastic, and we'll make sure all the links are in the show notes as well, so that way people can find you. Well, Lyla, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an honor.
Oh, thank you. That's so sweet.
Dan and I would like to thank Lyla for sharing her painting journey with us today. It really was a fantastic interview, and we enjoyed getting a chance to talk to her and learn more about her painting style and her perspective. Really appreciate it. Also appreciate her patience because of how late this interview was. And again, a huge thank you to her for her advice on my piece one of my pieces that I took the ReaperCon. You can follow Lyla on Instagram at lyla.mev. You can also follow her on YouTube at Lyla Mev the Mini Witch. Even better, head over to Patreon and look for Lyla Mev and see if you can give her some support as she continues her painting journey. So again, Lyla, thank you so much. You can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Listening to Paint Dry, on Twitter at Dry Listening. Drop us a line at listeningtopaintdry@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. Anything that you got on your mind about the world of miniature painting, we'd love to talk to you about it. Also, we are open to critiques of the show, so feel free to let us know how we're doing. Please also like, subscribe, or follow us wherever you get your podcasts from. If you could leave us a 5-star review, we'd greatly appreciate it. And any help you can spreading the word about the podcast would be joyful to Dan and I. So thank you very much for listening. We really appreciate all of you out there in the podcast world. Embrace your own style. Be the artist that you want to be. And you'll become a much better, braver, happier painter. Until next time. Listening to Paint Dry with Mike and Dan is a production of LTPTWMD. All rights reserved. No portion of this recording may be used without the express written consent of the host. The music is Death by a Thousand Questions by Springtide. Download from the Free Music Archive on a non-commercial attribution share-alike basis. All views and opinions expressed in the show are solely the views and opinions of the person who said them. All celebrity voices, if any, were impersonated and done so poorly.